Decade of Sacrifice, Navigating MD PhD as a Parent and Partner. I started medical school in 2012 with the MD class of 2016. I'll graduate this May, 11 years later, with the MD PhD class of 2023. 4 of those years were expected, 2 preclinical and 2 clinical years for the MD. 5 more were added for the PhD, completed between the preclinical and clinical years of medical school. Another was interspersed throughout the 2 clinical years of medical school when my husband moved to another state for a 3-year fellowship, and I stayed behind to solo parent our daughters during most of my clerkships, and the last was tacked on as a leave of absence when COVID shutdowns and interstate travel restrictions would have kept our family separated indefinitely. I've been married for 9 of those years and a parent for 7. I had our first daughter just a few weeks after I passed my PhD qualifying exam, and my husband started his intern year of residency. I had our second 2 years later, after I had switched labs, and my husband had started his final year of residency. And I had our third 3 years later, after I had finished most of my 3rd year clinical clerkships, and my husband had finished his first year of fellowship, and the whole world had set itself on fire. I was the primary parent, and I was parenting alone most of the time. During my graduate years, I got the kids ready and handed them off for the day, worked in the lab 9, 5, and then picked them up, played with them, fed them, bathed them, put them to bed, cleaned and prepped for the next day, before writing or analyzing data, or reading until I couldn't stay awake anymore. I brought my first tiny academic wingman to my first conference and gave my first presentation with her snuggled on my chest. I wrote my 243-page dissertation and prepped slides for my defense late at night with a sick child on my shoulder. During the clinical years, I coordinated early morning care for the days I needed to leave the house at 4 a.m. and late evening care for the days I couldn't leave the hospital in time for daycare pickup at 6 p.m. I saved my 2 annual personal days for Halloween and the annual daycare-wide performance of the Nutcracker. I studied for shelf exams and board exams on my phone in the dark, sandwiched between 2 children who didn't sleep through the night until this year, and another who still wakes up at least twice a night. Most days looked like this, and many still do. During my rotations, I stood with another mom as her 2-year-old died and listened to a 13-year-old share the experience of her suicide attempt for the first time, and played peekaboo with a 4-year-old, while my attending looked for signs of abuse, more subtle than her obvious bruises and fractures, and realized that I wanted to work with children and their families. I made plans to apply to 3 specialties that would allow me to do so: psychiatry, pediatrics, and triple board, which combines pediatrics with adult and child, adolescent psychiatry, at the hospital where my husband works, the only location that would allow us to stay where we are now. It is unusual to apply to more than one specialty, and especially unusual to apply to only one location. For each of those specialties, students usually apply to an average of around 45 programs, with the goal of interviewing with around 10 programs. But my daughters have been through enough, and I will not put them through another move. So I applied to 3 programs, interviewed at all 3, and ranked all 3. At 10 a.m. today, I'll find out whether I matched, and at noon on Friday I'll find out which specialty I matched to. I'm too tired to even know what I want, whether I want to match or not, which program I want to match to. If I match, I know that the next 5 years of my life are largely out of my control, and I will lose time with my daughters. I'm particularly sad at the thought of losing that time during the last few years that my oldest is still excited to hang out with me. If I don't match, I'm sitting on $250,000 in debt, without a clear path to repayment, and back to square one in the finding a fulfilling career game. And the time already lost in my daughter's early years will sting even more than it already does. I was planning to process all of this alone today, but of course it's a professional development day for our school system, so my girls will be right here with me. They know that I'm nervous. They know that I'll probably cry no matter what the email says. They know that I'll be both happy and sad at the same time, and they know that we'll be okay. This morning I saw my oldest looking through our giant pile of Costco greeting cards, and I heard her tell my middle that she chose the one that says "Good job," because no matter what happens, Mama did a good job. And my middle solemnly declared that she would stop my youngest from spilling all the cups today because that would probably be extra hard for Mama today, while my youngest calmly poured her water on the cat in the other room. These kids. My heart. Update 1. I matched to my top choice, psychiatry. It's bittersweet, as my 7-year-old told me it would be, to close the door on pediatrics, and I think a part of me was hoping to fall down my rank list to triple board, which would have allowed me to do both. But this was the best outcome for my family and ultimately for me as well. In just a half-decade or so, I'll be ready to practice independently, and I'm so excited to help kids and their families and learn all of the things I should have done differently with mine. Edit 1. I matched. My oldest read the email. All 3 ran around screaming, and then they went and pulled out the Costco card, the extra special other cards they made, and the bag of program, but not specialty, specific swag my husband had hidden for me. I assume he had a no-match bag hidden too, so now I'm on the hunt because that one probably has more candy. Edit 2. Thank you all for your thoughts and well wishes. One of the hardest things about adding the PhD, and then 2 extra other years, is that I know very few people in my graduating class, and it has been lovely to share this day with a larger community. Did you find the candy? No, my husband was certain I'd match and had no backup plan. Of all the things to be mad about that. Fear not, though, I had my own candy at the ready, as I always do. Why do you have so much debt as an MD PhD? Because I paid for my first year and a half, about $80K in total, and that's now $120K thanks to interest from 2012 until the loan pause. The rest is from childcare and a year of paying for both an apartment, VHCOL city, and a house, relatively HCOL area of an LCOL state, so somewhere in the middle. A resident salary doesn't cover that, so we flexed my loans instead. Why did you bother with the PhD if you were just going to practice clinically, you dum-dum? I'm in a research track residency, and research is likely in my future. But really? Because I wanted to. What the hell is wrong with your husband? And why didn't he make any sacrifices at all ever? This is a tough one. I love how much more support you all want me to have, and how mad you are. I want more and I'm mad too, but I'm not mad at him so much as I'm mad at the system. This isn't the way either of us thought things would turn out, and we've done our best to pivot and find a way forward that would let us balance our careers and our family, on a tightrope obviously. It's also not a situation we wandered into blindly. We made conscious decisions at every step, we made them together, and we both sacrificed. We started medical school a year apart, him first, then me, and then we got engaged. I decided that I wanted to pursue to PhD, and he supported me fully, even knowing that his options for residency would be limited to our city, because I would be stuck there and that we would be doubling our most challenging years because our paths were offset. I told him that I desperately wanted kittens, because I had always had cats, and our house felt empty without them, and he helped find 2 to adopt despite his lifelong love of dogs and general mistrust of cats. I suggested a total DIY wedding and a month-long honeymoon immediately following his sub-I and encompassing ERAS, residency application submission, and he hopped right on board. He applied only to residencies within our extremely competitive city. We had kids mostly just when I thought we should have kids, based on when I thought it would be best to physically carry and deliver and breastfeed and such. This included during his intern year, during his final year of residency, and during his first year of fellowship. The first and last being possibly the very worst times in medical training to add any extra life stress, and the middle, no picnic either. He applied only to fellowships within our extremely competitive city the first time around, and when he didn't match, he worked there as a hospitalist for the year. He would have continued to do so, but he was a shell of himself, and I actively encouraged him to apply again, this time more widely. I hoped that maybe I could transfer to finish out clinical rotations, or if I couldn't transfer, then I could take a leave of absence, or at the very least, just leave completely with my PhD. He found out that he matched out of state 3 hours away, around the time I found out that my school would not consider any of those options. I could stay, or I could leave without my PhD, and with a payback bill of roughly $430K, non-MSTP. He told me he would gladly pay back my debt if I wanted to leave, break his contract and stay if I wanted him to, or figure something else out. We figured something else out, which seemed like the best of 3 crummy options. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't easy, but it was a finite and doable plan that should have, involved spreading roughly 18 months of clinical rotations out over 3 years. It would have allowed me to bring our kids to visit him for a full month every other month, and during rotations we would have, and did, see each other every weekend. But alas, life and COVID. I made the biggest sacrifices there, I'll give you that. But one of us had to make money, and he was the only one who could do that. He was also the only person whose level of training made him actually useful to society during a pandemic, though that didn't factor into my decision to take a leave of absence, which my school was suddenly totally on board with. Very cool. Those years were garbage for everyone in the world, so I won't dwell on them. I was not okay, and he was working most of the time. But that would have been true whether I took a leave with him or stayed the course without him, and we both had more time with our kids and each other than we would have otherwise. And then he finished fellowship, and he applied to attending jobs in the very few locations that I felt I would be happy whether I matched to residency or not. Bought us a sweet old house, even though it probably, definitely made more sense to rent for a while because I loved it, and he knew I didn't want to move again. Gave me the green light to make my own decisions about residency, a career change, or just some solid time away from work to decide what I wanted, and made it clear that he would support whatever choice I made in every way he could. If you're mad at anyone, be mad at the system that's had him working 80, 120-hour weeks for the last 8 years, because for the remaining 88 hours, he has been an engaged parent and husband, even when he probably wanted nothing more than to fall into bed. And a little bit at him, but mostly because of the candy thing. Yeah, but why couldn't he take the kids, so you could do your thing? I mean, he could have. And he did. There would a couple months at the end of COVID when I started rotations again, and he held down the fort with our older girls. The youngest came with me because she was still breastfeeding and I had the boobs. And a couple more when he had all 3 once she stopped breastfeeding. Beyond that, it didn't make sense to leave the kids with him and pay a nanny or daycare there when we already had to pay daycare in my city to keep their spots. Why did you even have kids if you don't even see them or provide stability for them? We like them. Also, if you're intentional about spending what little time you have together, and also about the way you spend that time, you can create lovely relationships and foster stability even in the midst of chaos, but mostly because we like them.